Welcome back. In our last session, we introduced the book of Daniel and explored the concepts of biblical theology. Today, we will dive deeper into how Daniel fits into the larger story of God's salvation history in the New Testament and the Old. The first 5 books of the Bible, known as the Torah, lay the groundwork for understanding God's redemptive plan. We see the origins of sin in Genesis 3, the establishment of God's covenant with Abraham in Genesis 12, the formation of Israel as God's chosen people in the Exodus. These foundational events set the stage for the rest of the Old Testament narrative. In key scriptures in the Torah, we see in Genesis 3:15 the proto-evangelium, or the telling of the first gospel, hinting at God's plan to defeat evil through a descendant of Eve. Then in Genesis 12:1-3, the Abrahamic covenant promises blessings to the nations through Abraham's offspring. These passages establish key themes that resonate throughout the Old Testament: the problem of sin, the promise of redemption, the central role of Israel in God's plan. The books of the prophets and the writings expand on the Torah's themes, providing further details about how God's plan for salvation. The prophets speak of judgment for Israel's disobedience, but also offer hope of restoration and a coming Messiah. The writings, particularly the Psalms, express the longing of God's people for deliverance and the establishment of God's kingdom. Some key scriptures in this light are Isaiah 53, the suffering servant. This suffering servant in prophecy is a poignant picture of the Messiah's sacrificial death for the sins of the world. Then we see in Jeremiah 31, verses 31-34, the promise of a new covenant, emphasizing inner transformation and a forgiveness of sins. And lastly, Ezekiel 37, verses 1-14, this vision of the valley of dry bones, symbolizing the resurrection of God's people and their future hope. These passages deepen our understanding of God's redemptive plan and point us towards the ultimate fulfillment of His promises. Daniel's prophetic ministry takes place during a pivotal time in Israel's history, the Babylonian exile. His visions and prophecies offer hope and encouragement to a people facing despair and uncertainty. He reveals God's sovereignty over the nations, predicts the rise and the fall of empires, and points towards the coming of God's eternal kingdom. A few additional key scriptures: Daniel 2, verses 44. This prophecy echoes the theme of God's eternal kingdom, established by a stone cut out without human hands and symbolizing divine intervention. And then Daniel chapter 7, verse 13 and 14. This vision of the Son of Man receiving dominion and glory points to the coming Messiah who will rule over all the nations. Daniel's unique position in both the prophets and the writings allow him to speak to both the immediate historical context and the broader sweep of God's plan. He comforts the exiles with the promise of restoration, while also revealing God's ultimate purpose for the world. As James Hamilton emphasizes, to truly understand Daniel's message, we must seek the meaning the author intended to communicate. This requires considering the historical context, the literary genre, and theological themes of the book. We must also be attentive to how later biblical authors, particularly in the New Testament, interpret and apply Daniel's prophecies. By exploring this rich tapestry of Old Testament and recognizing Daniel's place within it, we gain a deeper appreciation and understanding for the unity and the coherence of God's Word. We see how the themes of sin, judgment, hope, and redemption weave throughout the biblical narrative, culminating ultimately in the person and the work of Jesus Christ.